同志们好。
加快把人民军队建成世界一流军队，是全面建设社会主义现代化国家的战略要求。全面加强人民军队党的建设，确保枪杆子永远听党指挥。
The PLA Navy is the largest in terms of numbers of surface ships and vessels.
我们将拼命而战，不辱使命，坚决挫败任何形式的外部势力和台独分裂企图。
如果要打的话，是要奉陪的，而且是可以作战到底的，可以血战到底的等等。
Many people have expressed fears that we are closer to war than we have ever been in decades. What are your thoughts on this?
I think they're right in thinking like that. I always believe the South China Sea, for example, is more dangerous than Taiwan Straits.
China's military is in a hurry. President Xi has said that the country must prepare to face dangerous storms. And he has tasked the military to achieve a set of goals by its centennial anniversary in 2027. U.S. intelligence has said that President Xi has instructed the PLA to be ready to invade Taiwan by 2027. But many analysts say nothing so specific has been commanded.
So when this timeline came out, it was about achieving the development of a strategic deterrence system. So the strategic deterrence capabilities, so is primarily, I think, focused on sort of having high-end advanced capabilities that to deter particularly the U.S. And some of its allies from intervening. Things like nuclear, things like long-range ballistic missiles, space capabilities, and all those sort of high-end capabilities that are made for great power competition.
What is known is the PLA's goal for 2049, the year marking the 100th anniversary of the People's Republic of China's founding. The Chinese military started a process of modernization when President Xi took power. In 2013, during the 12th National People's Congress, President Xi described his thinking on security.
我们越发展壮大，遇到的阻力和压力就会越大，面临的外部风险就会越多。这是我国由大向小发展进程中无法回避的挑战。
With that, President Xi ordered the PLA to modernize at speed.
同志们好！同志们辛苦了！
I think there is a prioritization of defense in Chinese policy making at the moment. And I think President Xi thinks he can bring China closer towards that goal of becoming a rejuvenated China. I think he sees himself as personally invested in that. And secondly, of course, as tensions grow, the PLA plays a really big role in upholding China's strength and power.
Xi Jinping has a number of different characteristics when it comes to engaging with the PLA compared with his predecessors. First, that is that he's much more hands-on, which means that he's much more engaged in the in the minutiae of military issues. I mean, when you look at when you compare his predecessors, especially Jiang Zemin and Hu Jintao, they sort of attended important meetings. They sort of gave regular talks about how important the military is. But Xi Jinping, he's invested a lot more time and effort. If you look at the amount of time he goes and visits military facilities, attends military meetings, etc., he sort of significantly spent more time than compared to Hu Jintao or Jiang Zemin. And also, Xi Jinping holds another title. It's the Joint Command Headquarters of the Central Military Commission, which is sort of like a sort of more of an operational command, which is a very, very significant development that his predecessors didn't have.
The PLA budget has grown annually for the last decade. In 2014, its budget was $131 billion. This year, its declared defense spending is now close to $225 billion, up 7% from last year. This is second only to the United States' nearly $886 billion budget. Increased funding for the Navy has enabled a shipbuilding drive that expanded the Chinese fleet rapidly. According to the Pentagon's 2022 China Military Power Report, the PLA has the biggest navy in the world. It has 340 ships. The U.S. Navy's battle force consists of 293 ships. One indication of naval strength: aircraft carriers. In 1999, China refurbished an old Soviet model after purchasing it secondhand, making it the country's first carrier, the Liaoning. 10 years later, in 2019, they launched their first domestically produced carrier. The Shandong uses ski jump ramps to launch fighter aircraft. By 2022, China launched its third carrier, the Fujian. It was also locally built and designed. The vessel is the first in the fleet to be equipped with an electromagnetic catapult, enabling aircraft dispatches in rapid succession. Fujian, the carrier, takes its name from Fujian, the Chinese province, located directly opposite Taiwan. The choice of this name raised many eyebrows. In barely a decade, China went from imitation to independent design, to producing its own advanced technology. Senior Colonel Zhou Bo witnessed the Navy's modernization firsthand, having personally coordinated large-scale naval exercises in the past. He is now retired from active service, but still represents China at international security conferences.
If you ask me, when is the time when PLA Navy became a blue water Navy, I would argue that is the end of 2008, when PLA flotillas were sent to Gulf of Aden for counter-piracy operations. This kind of combat mission, although against the pirates, are really a kind of military operation that we conducted far away from Chinese coast. And we had non-stop exercises, and it still is continuing. I myself have been coordinator of the Chinese Navy's counter-piracy operation from 2009 to 2015. So I know clearly how big the Chinese flotilla is, sometimes even compared with EU Atlanta or NATO's naval forces. Sometimes they only have one ship working there. After finishing the missions in the Gulf of Aden, each time, that is roughly about 3 months, then these ships would sail around the world to familiarize themselves with uncharted waters, be it in the Atlantic Ocean, be it in the Bering Sea, be it in the Mediterranean. So it's now no longer a 3-month mission, so sometimes it could even last for 10 months. So that is why we are making progress in our own way without fighting a war.
在新的时代征程上，在实现中华民族伟大复兴的奋斗中， 建设强大的人民海军的任务，从来没有像今天这样紧迫。
It isn't just about firepower. China also wants an intelligent army. President Xi has called for the military to be ready for warfare that uses artificial intelligence, cloud computing, quantum computing, and the Internet of Things. For these, it needs personnel. So, it's stepping up on recruitment to draw the country's brightest young minds. As nationalist sentiment run high, Beijing has rolled out yet another 2 army recruitment programs in 2023. The Chinese military is modernizing fast, enabled by a $225 billion annual military budget. But there is a shortcoming. The Army newspaper, the PLA Daily, declared in November 2022 that China lacks talent, especially in operators of new high-tech weapons systems. And so Army recruiters are focusing their efforts on young graduates.
在高中的时候见到了真正的军人，在那时便发现了他们身上有一种特殊的气质。
在18岁这个年纪，是我最年轻、最气盛的年纪。我想做些有意义的事情。
当兵是我从小的梦想，长大以后一定要成为一名军人。
我就想趁着自己年轻，改变一下自己，因为部队是每一个热血男儿都向往的地方。
The PLA gives priority to university students majoring in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And according to state broadcaster CCTV, the aim is to ensure that 70% of new recruits in 2022 hold degrees.
青春有很多样子，很庆幸我的青春有迷彩的样子。
我很喜欢吃部队做的饭。
Youth who enlist in the PLA are, of course, no strawberries.
在3000米训练中，由于我在地方上训练少，导致了掉队。班长跑过来鼓励我说，要调整呼吸，跟上节奏。运用了班长的方法，我很快跟上了队伍。
我最难忘的一次，还是我练习擒敌术的时候吧。在那个时，我的腿总是踢不高，我就告诉自己，自己还不能放弃。到了现在，我的腿脚也踢得比以前更加直、更加高了。
The PLA's recruitment drive is working, but getting them to stay in the Army is another matter. A 2021 survey in one Army unit revealed that only 35% of undergraduates who completed their service in the PLA wanted to remain on active duty. The percentage is even lower among those who had graduated. Improving the quality of personnel in the military has long been a preoccupation of President Xi's. Here, he's speaking to student pilots at the Aviation University of the Air Force.
都是高中毕业是吧？是。经过培养，是吧？通过一番淘汰，剩下的也就是这么一段黄金期，要珍惜，一定要珍惜。我们要爱护。 要保护一个飞行员培养，凝聚着党和人民期望。
没有一支强大的军队，就不可能有个强大的祖国。那么强大的军队呢，是这样一步一步走过来的。从我们的军校啊开始，我们这个光荣传统、英雄主义精神。 必须发扬光大，有了先进的飞机、防空武器，更要有压倒敌人、不惧一切强敌的这种英勇气概，这才是我们强军的魂。希望大家再接再厉，不断努力，取得你们最光荣的业绩。
The training is rigorous. the equipment modern. But if the PLA is benchmarking itself against the American forces, as they themselves have stated, then there is another shortcoming. Over the years, Russia has always been the preferred joint exercise partner. August 2021. As the pandemic rages on, China held a welcoming ceremony for the Russian military team to participate in the International Army Games in Xinjiang. May 2022. As Prime Minister Kishida and President Biden launched the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework in Tokyo, Russia and China engaged in a military exercise off the coast of Japan. September 2022. The Vostok military drills carried on despite the war in Ukraine. December 2022, China and Russia held a week-long joint live-fire naval exercise in the East China Sea. March 2023, China, Russia, and Iran conduct a Navy exercise near Iran's coast.
It seems like a lot of military exercises have been conducted with Russia. Why is that?
Because we are strategic partners. We do a lot of exercises with Russia, but not only with Russia. Russian military still has its own advantages because of its advanced weapon system, because of the combat experiences. Yeah, so we actually have benefited a lot from learning from Russians. But as I said before, we also did a lot of exercises with some other armed forces from which we have also drawn a lot of useful lessons.
China's strategic partnership with Russia is, of course, contentious for many in the world after the events in Ukraine.
Past, we saw usually that it was the former, where Russia had a leading role, and now more and more we're seeing that China is taking a leading role in some of these exercises and patrols. So in that sense, I think Europeans are going to be watching very closely.
China's foreign minister used his annual press conference to elaborate on the importance of China's relationship with Russia.
中俄携手，世界多极化和国际关系民主化就有了动力，全球战略平衡和稳定就多了保障。世界越是动荡不安，中俄关系就越要稳步前行。
The 4th Company of the 75th Brigade has a practice of standing before an old belt during major exercises in order to commemorate an event that happened 87 years ago. This belt was worn by a PLA soldier in 1936 during the Long March.
和光荣传统教育，确保官兵永远听党话、跟党走。我们一定要按照习主席教导的那样。 把理想信念的火种、红色传统的基因一代代传下去。
习主席强调，我军之所以能够战胜各种艰难困苦，不断从胜利走向胜利，最根本的就是坚定不移听党话、跟党走，这是我军的军魂和命根子，永远不能变，永远不能丢。
Military experts point out that there's an extensive emphasis on political indoctrination and ideology training in the PLA that you don't find in non-party militaries. Loyalty to the party was one key message that was sent by the PLA during its most significant exercise to date. And that was on the 4th of August 2022, when Nancy Pelosi paid Taiwan a visit.
我们敢于亮剑，敢于斗争，敢于胜利，坚决完成党和人民赋予的各项任务。我们坚决做到炮听我的话，我听党的话。
During the exercise, the PLA sent about 100 fighter jets and bombers to Taiwan's so-called airspace. During the drills, the Eastern Theater Command also deployed more than 10 destroyers and frigates in the waters around Taiwan.
This time, the missiles didn't fail. And so there is a reflection of how much more advanced the PLA's military technological capability has become.
In April 2023, when President Tsai visited the US, China simulated precision attacks and blockades of Taiwan. The scale of this exercise was smaller compared to the exercise in August 2022. President Xi has said repeatedly that reunification with Taiwan is China's destiny, and he doesn't mince his words.
我们坚持以最大诚意，尽最大努力，争取和平统一的前景，但绝不承诺放弃使用武力，保留采取一切必要措施的选项。
In a desert in northwest China, a missile brigade of the PLA rocket force is on a live fire drill. They're firing new missiles with advanced warheads, enabling accurate hits on targets hundreds of kilometers away. These men have been tasked to take half the usual time to carry out a missile launching.
快速反应能力的话，主要研究了咱们导弹武器根据现有的情况，它的技术流程是否有压缩的可行性。第二一个的话是加大对咱们平时发射单元的训练，重点是从难从严训练，提高我们一岗的发射单元号手的操作的精准度。
Mission accomplished.
在未来的战场上吧，应该是会发挥得更好。
In other desert locations, China is building more than 100 new silos for intercontinental ballistic missiles, or ICBMs. That's according to reports from security analysts released in 2022. For years, China maintained a minimal nuclear arsenal with only about 20 ICBMs, while Russia and the US had thousands of nuclear warheads. This is now rapidly changing. A Pentagon report states that China now has more than 400 nuclear warheads, approximately doubling its nuclear arsenal in just 2 years. And China could have 1,500 nuclear warheads by 2035.
Said that there are some ways that this still increases geopolitical tensions. From the point of view of most of the rest of the world, any of those three countries having a lot more nuclear warheads is not a positive thing.
China has consistently said that it has a no first use nuclear policy.
China is the only country that actually has committed itself to this no first use nuclear policy.
An ever-increasing budget, an ever-enlarging recruitment drive, a continual focus on combat readiness. But who does China perceive as a threat? While never explicitly stated by President Xi, there have been a number of speeches by other Chinese leaders, criticizing the US for its actions on Taiwan, its military presence in the Indo-Pacific region, its security partnership with Australia, India, and Japan, known as the Quad, and its partnership with Australia and the UK, known as AUKUS. The possibility of accidents leading to escalation is ever increasing. In May 2022, Australia's Defense Department said that a Chinese fighter aircraft flew close in front of the Australian aircraft and released a bundle of chaff containing small pieces of aluminum that were ingested into the Australian aircraft's engine. In June, Canada's military accused Chinese warplanes of harassing its patrol aircraft as they monitored North Korea sanction evasions. Both events took place in the South China Sea. Then, on the 29th of December 2022, the US military said a Chinese military plane came within 3 meters of a US Air Force aircraft in the contested South China Sea and forced it to take evasive maneuvers to avoid a collision in international airspace. The close encounter came after what the US called a recent trend of increasingly dangerous behavior by Chinese military aircraft.
Think about the military strength of China. Think about the fact that we, being so strong, are still talking about resolving this issue peacefully.
There are crisis control mechanisms in place. There are hotlines. There are agreed upon rules, and they don't work. And the reason they don't work is because the United States and China think of crisis control in very different ways. So from the American side, crisis control is something to be kept separate from the bilateral relationship. That is, whether bilateral relations are good or bad, there should always be robust crisis control. It's too important, even when relations are bad, not to make sure that isn't taken care of. From the Chinese point of view, however, crisis control is linked to bilateral relations. So from the Chinese point of view, if bilateral relations are bad, if China has a complaint about American policies, then crisis control should be one of the levers of pressure that the Chinese can use on the Americans. So we continue to have problems. When the United States uses the hotline and calls China, the Chinese don't pick up the phone.
If crisis control mechanisms don't work, then is conflict inevitable?